Okay, welcome everyone. Happy Thursday evening, the first Thursday of summer 2021. My name is Virginia Fiume, and I am the coordinator of the European Citizens Movement Humans, who is the leading organization of the European Citizen Initiative StopGlobalWarming.eu, a price for carbon to fight climate change. The initiative was launched almost 2 years ago, and through the activation of official instrument of participatory democracy provided by the European Union as a way to push for a carbon pricing, which is the title of the event, through the activation of citizens as well as organizations and the idea was to collect all the people that think that carbon pricing is a concrete solution to cut the CO2 emissions, a solution that's strongly based on scientific evidences, economical evidences and ecological evidences. I'm not an expert on climate and specifically the policy, but I coordinated the networking efforts of this European Citizen Initiative. And this event tonight is very dear to the heart of our Citizens Committee, because this is something that is very characteristic of this campaign. Our goal was to take something that was deeply rooted in the scientific community, part of the political debate at national level and European level for a lot of years, and try to make that something more accessible and known among the European public sphere in a moment where the European institutions started and now are on the verge of some very important decisions to show that there is a civic push for this type of policy. Through the campaign, Stop Global Warming was able to collect the support, as I said, of a variety of individuals, organizations, and citizens that are not necessarily involved in the environmentalist movement, in the environmental scientific community, but we think we were able to brought to the institutions an agenda setting element for sure. The European Citizen Initiative, to be officially audited by the European Commission, would have need to collect 1 million of signatures. Effectively, we collected only, but not only, 75,000 signatures. There is time until the 22nd of July, potentially, for signing and involving others in this. I want to mention that this result is not so low as the number indicate. Recently, a group of organizations that are active with this instrument ran a survey through YouGov on the knowledge of European citizens of this type of participatory democracy instrument. And according to the survey, only 2.4% of European citizens are aware they have the right to sign and support these type of instruments that are precious because help groups to, as I said, give an indication to the European Union and also play a part in the democratic process of the European Union. Tonight's meeting is organized by 4 amazing guys, Andrea Salimbeni, Carlo Maresca, Franco Donati, and Adam Oliver, who prepared a moment to take the proposal that Stop Global Warming created on carbon pricing and inviting discussants and all of you who are here tonight to try and reason together on where we are with the carbon pricing policy at this specific stage of the European Union process. In the next weeks, apparently around the 14th of July, the European Commission will present the Fit for 55 package, which has a lot of opportunities for a European role, not only within the European Union, but also for the European Union within the global context. And at the same time, we are going toward the COP26, which is, of course, another key moment. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to try to reason together on carbon pricing within the European Union borders and beyond the European Union borders, and potentially to try and create new networks and new lines of collaboration between different actors that operate for these at different levels. So I'm gonna now give the floor to Carlo Maresca, who is part of the scientific team of stopglobalwarming.eu, who will introduce us the meeting, the starting point that all of you have seen also in the preparatory documents. And then our facilitators, Franco and Andrea, will work with the discussants and with you to collect the feedback inputs and to try to come at the conclusion of the event, thanks to the help of Adam, with a good overview of what will be discussed tonight. Last but not least, it's important for me to mention that this event had been promoted on the Conference on the Future of Europe platform, which is a digital platform that accompanies the Conference on the Future of Europe. For those of you who don't know what this is a one-year-long process where the EU institutions and citizens, in a way that it's not for tonight, but it's an opportunity for the European Union community to come up with new reforms for the European Union. So the fact that this event tonight is also part of the opportunities for citizens and NGOs and civil society organizations to contribute to this deliberative process of the European Union, it's quite important, because we believe as humans, as Stop Global Warming, that every discussion should do the best possible to be part officially of the decision-making process of the institutions. So consider this also another way to activate instruments that we have available for bringing on our agenda and to inject the right level of ambition for the EU institutions. So the floor to Carlo Maresca. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great and productive and sustainable meeting tonight.
Thank you, Virginia. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to being with us this evening. So Carlo Maresca from the scientific team of Stop Global Warming, and I will do like a short introduction to the debate of this evening. Let's start with a brief explanation of the carbon pricing proposal of stopglobalwarming.eu. As you know, and as Virginia said, stopglobalwarming.eu is a European citizens initiative, and the ECI is the only participatory democracy instrument to influence directly the European policy. It's not legally binding for the European Commission and for the European Parliament, but until this is the only formal instrument, it's also the most powerful one to implement a civic lobbying initiative to push up for a well-designed carbon pricing system within the European Union. As you can see in the slide, Stop Global Warming asks for a European legislation to tackle climate crisis, and in particular to limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees with a carbon pricing policy. From our point of view, from stopglobalwarming.eu team, it's crucial to give certainty to the economic system to foster the ecological transition. And for this reason, we opted to an increase in carbon pricing floor that start from 50 euros to 100 euros in a period of 5 years. Actually, as you know better than me, the emission trading scheme still has a big portion of free allowances, and in our proposal, we propose to abolish them. It's pivotal to prevent carbon leakage and loss of competitiveness when implementing a strong carbon pricing system. And for this reason, we propose also to implement a carbon border adjustment at the EU border, also for encouraging other nations, other economies to do same policy of carbon pricing. Finally, we are of the belief that to increase the political feasibility of policy like that, it's important that all the additional revenue should be used to reduce the tax on lower income and to foster the costs related to the energy transition. Now let's talk about a bit about the political and policy context in which the proposal could be implemented. First of all, the European Union has already a carbon pricing system, the ETS. But the question, first of all, is if this policy is adequate to reach the emission reduction of the EU climate strategy, starting from the Fit for 55. Then an important question is the level of prices of carbon. The scientific literatures, as you know, talked a lot about this crucial issue. The issue is what is the social cost of carbon? Recently, the European Commission introduced the market stability reserves to control the quantity and the price of the emission permits. But this is enough, and is enough to reach the goals of reduction emission. Then in the last year, but mainly in the last month, the Parliament and the Commission are working on a proposal for a carbon border adjustment mechanism. The question is how to implement it. What other countries will do? How can we use the revenues? Is this policy compatible with the emission trading scheme? These questions, I think, are focal for the discussion around climate and energy politics in Europe, but in all the world. Then there is quite the most important moment in the next month, that is the COP26, that will take place in Italy and in England. And it's a great opportunity for the European Union to propose something disruptive, an extended carbon pricing policy to 100% of emissions. That could be an extended ETS to all sectors, or maybe a taxation system, a global taxation system following the example of Biden minimum tax on firms. Discussing this issue without considering the position of the USA and China, I think it's ineffective. So it's crucial also to consider the position of USA on carbon pricing, but also to understand the implementation of emission trading scheme in China. Thank you, everybody, and Franco, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's my turn then. Franco will moderate the session number 3, so the session on global perspectives of carbon pricing. So let's start from the European context, as the most important emission trading system worldwide has been developed in Europe, not recently, but more than 10 years ago now. The best way to approach and to understand how we can improve our carbon pricing system in Europe to make it reliable and sustainable for not only for the environment but also for our economy is to have the opinion of experts that every day work on the topic. So in this part of the debate, I'm very pleased to have Stefano Verde, Deputy Director of Florence School of Regulation, Barbara Maria, Policy Manager for Climate at the European. We have Michele Governatori, Scientific Committee Coordinator of Worldwide Carbon Price. We have also Femce Rotaus, president of X-Tax Project, and last but not least, Susanna Karp, political strategy director of Bellona Europe and executive board of New Europeans. I would like to start from the most complicated question. Basically, the most simple, but the most difficult to answer. Is the ETS, so the emission trading system in force in Europe, now approaching its phase 4, so from 2021, is our system really adequate to tackle the climate emergency? And what are the main weaknesses of the system? We know, and we will approach the problem and the structure of ETS. That means the instruments, the side instruments, for example, the market stability reserve and the carbon border adjustment, that are now under review at European level. I would like to ask the first question to Barbara Mariani, asking her opinion about the ETS as carbon pricing system, if the trading system is really the best way to put in place carbon pricing, and what are the main barriers in general, what are the weaknesses of this system as we could understand so far in our experience.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm Barbara Mariani. I lead Climate and Energy at the European Environmental Bureau, which is the largest environmental association in Europe, which brings together over 170 national environmental associations in 35 countries. Just briefly about myself, I've been working in the climate policy space for 20 years, so I really started when the ETS was still a small baby, and then I have also been working through the several reforms and reviews of this system. So at the EB, we are very active on carbon pricing, and I shared with you some documents, and you see also today we were in a meeting discussing exactly carbon pricing together with our members. So we have developed several proposals and several ideas. And to reply to your question, the ETS is one of the drivers of decarbonization, but it's not the only one. And unfortunately, the EU ETS has not functioned as it should have, and this is the big problem. Therefore, there is today a need to reform the system on one hand, but also to complement this the ETS with other tools, such as extending carbon pricing to other sectors, but also taking into consideration carbon taxes. So the ETS has not worked, first of all, because it only covers 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, and secondly, because it has been from the start hindered by the system of free allocations to industry. And this system is based plus, moreover, on historical production, meaning that production before the 28 economic and financial crisis. Therefore, the numbers are clearly not right, because after the crisis, Europe lost almost 1/4 of its production, and in the aftermath, even more, not mentioning the COVID's impact. So so free allowances based on historical production was a big mistake, and then this has caused a very low price in the ETS system, and also a huge surplus of allowances, which is still there. The market stability reserve has tried to fix this, but unfortunately, is still too weak, because the historical surplus is still too high. Okay, so this is the main problem, free allowances to industry. And I don't know if you are aware, but the CE Delft think tank published a few weeks ago a report where it shows that energy-intensive industry received 37 million of euros in allowances between 2008 and 2019, and the sectors which made more profits were exactly the most emission-intensive sectors, namely iron and steel, cement, refineries, and petrochemicals. These sectors got profits for worth of 1.6 billion during this period. Plus, these sectors, exactly the same, also got state aid to address the CO2 indirect costs, meaning that basically they are not paying for CO2 direct CO2 costs, and they are not paying for indirect CO2 costs. So this has hugely delayed industry decarbonization in Europe, despite what industry is arguing. And that's why we think that the ETS, as it is today, cannot work without removing the system of free allowances, removing all the state aid for energy-intensive industries, which basically delays the decarbonization of the energy supply and also of process emissions. And I would like to stop here because I'm not sure how much time I have, but I think I replied to this first question, and happy to go on. Thank you.
Yeah, really. Indeed, you launched I would like to have the opinion of all other participants, but approaching the barriers and weaknesses aspect, in addition to the free allocation, I think, and that is a general opinion, that free allowances are needed to ensure the competitiveness of our companies against the non-European competitors, for example. I would like so to have a tour of all participants, ask about the weaknesses they could identify in their studies and their research about the other two aspects that are interesting the ETS, which are the market stability reserve as an instrument to ensure a price, quite fixed price, and the carbon border adjustment. I remember that the European University Institute written a document about the market stability reserve. I would like to ask to Stefano Verde about what is the market stability reserve and why it should be probably integrated or reviewed as a system to make the ETS more efficient and stable in the next years.
Well, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here in this meeting. Thanks, and thank you for the invitation. Andrea, I didn't understand when you said why the MSR should be integrated with?
No, there is the policy brief of the University of Hamburg, to which also European University Institute participated, about the market stability reserve and the mechanism of stability of ETS. So I would like to have actually your opinion about the role of market stability reserve and what it could play in the next year.
Yeah, okay, so that was a policy brief that was produced by, not by us at the UI, but by well, Grisha Perino, who is at Hamburg indeed, Hamburg University, and co-authors, I remember Michael Pale from PEAK Potsdam, and others. The point that they made is well, a criticism about the MSR and a suggestion for improvement. And their suggestion is to, it's quite technical actually, I mean, but the suggestion is to change the triggers that are used currently in the MSR, which are quantity triggers. That is basically when the surplus of allowances in the system exceeds a certain threshold, then allowances are withdrawn from the system, and conversely, when the surplus in the system goes below a certain threshold, allowances are injected into the system. And their recommendation is to change these triggers into price as opposed to quantity triggers. Okay, so above a certain price level, when the price reaches a certain level, you withdraw allowances. When the price go below a certain level, then you remove the allowances. Maybe I got it wrong, but I hope you understood. So that is their their suggestion, their specific advice. Now, I think that the arguments that they offer are good, and I share them. But my skepticism is about this time, the current time, whether this type of reform should be done now and not later in time. I think that at the moment, the ETS is object of a number of reforms, and this particular one about the MSR, I think, maybe next round of reforms would be a better time, because reforms that are now under study, like the possible extension to other sectors and the tightening of the cap to align the system with the Green Deal objectives and the 2030 objective, are important ones. And so I think that it's more a matter of convenience to reconsider this option that personally I agree with, but not this being the right moment. I think that the MSR has proved to work well since it was strengthened. It was strengthened in 2018, mainly by. The main point and the main innovation was that allowances are, under certain conditions, are removed permanently from the system, because before there was, are cancelled basically from the system, and these had an effect on expectations, and therefore on price expectations, and therefore on the prices observed. So far the MSR has done the trick, but it can be improved, and for me it should be revised later. I would like to add something to what was said before by Barbara, if I may. So one thing is that I think that it's not correct to say that free allocation per se is the cause of the low prices that we have seen in the past. Because whether the allowances, the allocation method, whether the allowances are given for free or through auctions, does not impact on the equilibrium price. So what matters there is, of course, the scarcity of allowances in the system, and the flow that the ETS had. The flow that the ETS had is that there was not a mechanism to adjust supply. So the supply was given, was rigid. And the demand instead changed with economic activity mainly, and so after the economic crisis, that was a major shock, and there was no adjustment of supply. So the free allocation per se is not a cause of the low price. It's a distributional issue. The free allocation, you are foregoing fiscal revenues, because if you auction the allowances, you get revenues. If you give them for free, you're giving them to companies. They're getting that for free. So it's a distributional issue between government revenues and the regulated companies. I think that the windfall profits, that is what Barbara was talking about, is has been a major issue precisely for distributional reasons. But I think that now we have what we had before for the future. This is not the issue number one. Let's put it this way. But I don't want to talk more. I would like to hear what the others say.
What is the issue number one, Stefano? Then we pass to the other question.
Well, there are many, and one that we will talk about later, the CBAM, relates to free allocation, because there's not a rationale for having free allocation. Free allocation once you have a CBAM. Okay, so there I perfectly agree. But and so the resistance of regulated companies to the removal of free allocation, that is really that is not, in my view, is not justified. But this, you see, it's a different. It's again about free allocation coming from a different problem that we have. Also, not all, but a big part of the windfall profits that we had in the past were in the electricity sector, and as of phase 3, so as of 2013, the electricity sector buys the allowances at auctions. So part of the of the windfall profits has been sold.
Okay, that is an interesting point. I see that the debate could also take place between speakers, and I'll be very pleased. But I would like to introduce a few other points of discussion and ask to Susanna Karp about her opinion. We talk about stability reserve. We, as Susanna knows, but as we have already presented, we proposed a threshold, a minimum threshold, which could probably be an alternative of the stability reserve. Why a minimum price is still not on there, and if it is really feasible to think that ETS could be amended with a minimum price to CO2. And then, second question: what should be the minimum price?
Thank you very much for the question, and good evening all. It's really a pleasure to take part in this debate and to be online with so many of you. I guess we're all quite tired of Zoom at this point, but at the same time we're all online for this chat because it's actually really important. I do want to, I should say that I agree with the points raised by the previous speakers, and I will do my very best to add new points so that we keep the debate engaging and alive. Just before I do that, though, very briefly, I'd like to introduce Bellona Europa, which is the EU branch of the Bellona Foundation, founded in the 80s in Norway, already with a mission to fight climate and environmental crisis. So our focus with time, at least in the EU office, has actually become the decarbonization of heavy industry. But I should say that related to that, we're actually working on a wider set of sectors. And obviously, since heavy industry is covered by the EU ETS, we are quite concerned with the very little impact that the EU ETS has had on these sectors. But I will get back to that later. First of all, the EU ETS is 16 years old, which means that right now we could consider this evening the 16th sweet 16 birthday party. I think that's what it's called. And what that also means is that the ETS is approaching maturity, and we have seen it in the last 2 years, finally, let's say, starting to live up to its mission. But unfortunately, it's still going through quite an awkward phase, and it is unpredictable as it stands, mostly because the price increase hasn't been actually supported by the market fundamentals in the EU ETS. So we have to be very careful there. And to pick up on the question you've addressed to me, is a carbon floor price needed? I would say absolutely, because we are actually now faced with the risk whereby the price could still drop. The price increase hasn't been dictated by necessarily the market or the emissions, but rather we've seen a very similar trend with asset markets more generally during the pandemic. So what that means is that the EU ETS, the moment that real economic factors start trickling in, could actually roll back on the price. So first of all, we need a carbon floor price as a critical guarantee for investments that we need to be making today at the beginning of the 2020s to meet our long-term climate targets. Coming back to heavy industry, we know that the investment cycles there are 30 years long. So really this decade is the decade to start making those investments. And let's say 2025 is probably already on the late end of the spectrum. Now, a carbon floor price does not replace the market stability reserve. And in fact, it's a very interesting thing that you've touched on there earlier to say that maybe so that we should switch from quantity regulation to an auction reserve price type approach. And in reality, the market stability reserve is there to actually deal with the surplus as it accumulates. Now, of course, because the EU ETS is plagued with historical surplus, the market stability reserve is not actually yet absorbing the, let's say, the surplus that builds up, but rather still absorbing past surplus from the previous phases. But that doesn't mean that the MSR is not needed. And this will be basically the proposition I'll put for the debate. Not only is the MSR needed, but it is the single most critical element for the alignment with the Paris Agreement. Just to give an example, without the MSR, you could have allowances, well, at least without the MSR cancellation clause, sorry. Without the MSR cancellation clause, you could actually have allowances returning back to the market way into the 2070s, 2080s. But because the MSR now has a built-in cancellation clause, which is directly related to the emissions as they drop, that means that already in the 2050s, probably not exactly 2050, but we will no longer have allowances. So that actually gives us quite an interesting endpoint for the trajectory of the cap limiting emissions, because the cap is what an environmental NGO cares about, right? So we want to see the cap putting down the emissions. Okay, and now just whether. Okay, I can also stop.
No,
here.
please. Then. No, please. If you finish, please. Don't worry.
The reason why we also need the MSR is so that the ETS can work alongside cooperatively and happily with other policies. So in the past, there was this idea that if you actually, you know, there were two schools of thought, maybe let's say a couple of more sub-schools of thought, but generally speaking, you were either in the carbon pricing pool or you were into the direct regulation school of thought. And the idea was that actually, if you had targets on renewables and energy efficiency, you were impacting negatively the EU ETS. But because of the market stability reserve, you actually have this debate completely put to rest, because what is now happening is that the more you deploy additional policies, additional regulation, direct targets, the more you're actually absorbing with the MSR and the more you will be canceling from the scheme. So there's no more waterbed effect, and that means the ETS is alive. It reacts in real times almost over the span of 2 to 3 years, but to the deployment of accelerated policies. And to be quite frank, this is exactly what we need. So, thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Very interesting. We are running out of time for the first panel, so I will keep a last question, then introducing the second, because global section is very interesting. I would like to ask to Femce Rotos about our proposal, actually. So ETS is there. Is there an alternative, which is the pricing in the form of a tax? And is it really impossible to think about a new European fiscal system where the revenues are allocated at EU level and not at like now with ETS. So what can we imagine as an alternative to ETS in terms of carbon emission taxation in Europe?
Hi, thanks for your question. Thank you for having me here with you today. I really support the initiative of Stop Global Warming to engage the public on the question of pricing of carbon as well as the use of revenues. So that's great that you have so many signatures and people engaged in this subject. This is really such an important topic for the near future, as the challenges are so huge, not just with regard to climate change, but other resource supply risks, health issues, et cetera, and they are all interconnected. So half of global greenhouse gas emissions are actually caused by the extraction and processing of natural resources. And that means that without reshuffling, changing our economies to change also not just our energy use or our emissions, but also our consumption patterns fully in line with the circular economy, there is really no way we can become a climate neutral continent or achieve the Paris Climate Agreement goals. So to solve the climate crisis, it's absolutely key to address the full scope of our consumption patterns and our economic growth model that we have. So and this is where the Green Deal comes in, looking at that both from an economic perspective, climate perspective, but also a tax perspective, because currently our system is our tax systems are fully aligned with the linear economy, with the take, make, waste economy, in which we take resources and we use as few people as possible to create as much output as possible, which turns into waste very quickly. And in that process, we emit the greenhouse gas emissions that we need to abolish over the next decades. So to shift our economy, businesses need to shift their business models from the linear approach, the take, make, waste approach, to circular models in which there is no emissions, ideally, no external costs, and also no external health effects. And to do so, we have to align our financial structure, our financial incentives in our economies, and especially in our tax systems, because currently over half of all tax revenues across the EU are based on labor taxes. So we put a high price on labor, on work that people do, on creativity and craftsmanship, and all the work that needs to be done to install all the new technologies and to redesign and to find new materials, to do the recycling, the refurbishment, the repair services, etc. So those are all labor-intensive or knowledge-intensive activities. And the fact that we take half of our tax revenues from putting a tax burden on labor really doesn't help businesses move into those types of activities. And at the same time, only 6% of our budgets across the EU are based on green taxes, including carbon and fuel, etc. taxes, and so are pricing mechanisms. And so that means that the financial incentives really aren't there to change our way of life in our economies. So carbon is basically, putting a price on carbon is absolutely important. It's just one piece of the puzzle that we need to put to solve this huge challenge. And also, it's too small to actually look at it in a bigger perspective, where we can also look at the social impacts and the impacts on jobs and competitiveness, etc. So in our foundation, the XTax project, we look at the tax system from the perspective of the dynamics of green taxes versus labor taxes. And we have researched shifting the tax burden away from labor and onto natural resource use and pollution for the past 12 years, finding that such a shift would be really, really beneficial to both the economy, to employment, to carbon emissions, to import dependence, fossil fuel import dependence, et cetera, et cetera. So there's multiple benefits to be achieved. And so in our research, we also include carbon pricing. In fact, in our latest study that will be that has been published in Dutch, first of all, ahead of our general elections in February, but will be published in September for the EU in English. It includes a broad-based tax shift scenario where it also includes a carbon price floor for the ETS sectors of 60 euros per ton in 2025. It also includes the same price for non-ETS sectors. It also includes pricing of pollution as well as carbon emissions from shipping, from aviation. It includes ammonia emissions from agriculture, water pricing, waste incineration, et cetera, so as to really shift the incentives that are in the economy. And the results are quite amazing for all EU countries. So we hope to also stimulate the debate to go broader, to go beyond carbon pricing.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the interesting point of view. I think I totally agree actually with you that we need to broaden the sustainability pricing, the unsustainability pricing, giving an indicator to many other sectors which are now not covered. The most urgent is the waste incineration, and I am personally a supporter of that. I would like to introduce the second session on global perspective with a hot topic of the carbon border adjustment. I leave the question, the last question we got from Paola Fiore to Alberto Maiocchi, because it perfectly introduces to the topic of carbon border adjustment and to the initiative, to the carbon pricing initiative. The question is, the Citizens Initiative is also about introducing a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is currently in this form would contribute to increasing the climate injustice throughout hitting the poorest countries without real solution. So I would like Alberto Maiocchi to give his idea and opinion about carbon border adjustment, and then afterwards to Franco to moderate the last part of the debate. Please, Alberto.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. I will try to be short. So the border carbon adjustment is a piece, unavoidable piece of a general policy for fighting climate change. Without the border carbon adjustment, there will be no carbon price at the world level, and the carbon price is the most important instrument for guiding the future development of a sustainable economy at the world level. So the problem that Paula suggests is very important, the problem of burden sharing from a certain point of view. The border carbon adjustment is an instrument to put a pressure on all the other countries to adopt a kind of policy similar to the policy adopted by the European Union, putting a price on carbon. But there is a problem of equity. So my proposal is to support the ideas put forward by the former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Rajan. Rajan has recently proposed to create a fund of $100 billion, funded in this way. The countries with a level of emissions per capita higher than 5 tons per year have to pay to the fund, and this money should be distributed to the countries with emissions lower than 5 tons per year. So if we accompany a policy of carbon pricing extended to all sectors of the economy, this is the first stone of the European proposal. But this stone should be supported by border carbon adjustment. And border carbon adjustment is important from 2 points of view. First, is a own resource for the European budget, because Europe has competence in commercial sector. So this is directly own resource without having to adopt the treaty that requires unanimity in the Council and approval by all the parliaments. This is a new resource for the European budget. From the other side, it is convenient for other countries to implement a similar system to the European one, because otherwise they have to pay to Europe the price of carbon without having any resource of their budget. But this package of measures should be complemented, in my view, with the Russian proposal. The fund of $100 billion has been proposed by COP15 in 2009. So it's time to adopt this idea. And I think that the proposal to pay, if the country has emission per capita higher than the world average, to support countries with emission per capita lower than world average could be a good system for equitable burden sharing of this kind of policy.
Thank you, Professor Maiocchi. Franco, I leave the floor to you and to the other speaker representing the global perspective of the carbon pricing mechanism. And of course, I hope that all the speakers could then participate in the hot debate of this final part.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Yes. Well, we get right into it then on I think this question on carbon border adjustment, the mechanism is quite interesting, and of course the issue of well, climate justice in general, I think it's quite relevant. And but with regards to actually the point also of stimulating other countries in implementing a carbon tax or a carbon some sort of carbon pricing system, is the carbon border adjustment mechanism a good policy to encourage other countries to do carbon pricing? But I was wondering if Michele Governatori can address this question.
Okay, sorry, I always take too much time to switch on the microphone.
Same here.
So good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me. Just 30 seconds to say what is WCP, Worldwide Carbon Price. It's an initiative that we recently funded in Brussels with already quite a lot of international supporters. And basically the idea is supporting the idea of a global carbon pricing. Before Franco get into your point, if I can, my understanding is that we are basically discussing now between market-based carbon pricing solutions and administered carbon pricing solutions. I tend to have the following opinion, which also is connected to what might have gone wrong with the ETS. Basically, I think that if you choose a market-based solution for carbon pricing, you should also know that it comes with volatility, right? Because usually markets are based on short-term signals, shocks in demand, some possible, I would say, especially in demand, which can alone give a lot of volatility to markets. It's also true that, and this does not apply only to environmental markets, that usually investors, at least in a capitalist system, are able to deal with volatility. So I expect that investors might correctly react to even to a very volatile signal, even to a signal which might have low periods, for example, when there are negative shocks in the economy. They should be able also to internalize the risk / opportunity of spikes in prices. So I wouldn't say that volatility, uncertainty in the short term is necessarily a problem, because this is part of a market-based solution. The problem, in my opinion, when designing a system is when, and this happens a lot, it happened with the ETS, but it also happened, I live in Italy, in the green certificates quota and trade system, in the white certificates quota and trade systems, which are very similar to the ETS. Basically, if you want the market system, but you also want to have a policy a grasp on it and avoid too much volatility, then usually you do a bad work. So I don't have a solution. My point is, before throwing away market systems because we don't like volatility, taking into consideration the market systems also provide useful information on costs, which are very interesting. Now, CBAM, yeah, I totally agree with many of you that the success of carbon border adjustment mechanism is very linked to the success of ETS, and probably very linked to the success of carbon pricing in the world. I see the possible issues in terms of carbon justice, but let me mention a study coordinated by the OECD, by Jonas Toisch in particular, which is a member of the scientific committee of WCP. According to this OECD study, a developing, so relatively poor country will benefit from adopting carbon pricing. So carbon pricing is not something only suitable for rich countries. So if the CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, will succeed in triggering new carbon pricing systems in other countries, especially in developing countries, because if making them react with introducing their carbon pricing and so being treated in a better way in the European market, I'm not this sure that this is going to be unfair, even with the poorest country. So again, and this is the last thing I'm saying now, clearly, if the CBAM develops as the rich carbon concerned region of the world, using this as an excuse to protect their markets, clearly this will fail. And it will give also secondary damages. But if the CBAM succeeds in convincing other countries, especially developing countries, to imitate a broad use of carbon pricing, and is fast to react in assessing this, so taking into the club, let's say this, in an early stage, every country, especially developing country, adopting its own carbon pricing, and being also able to integrate with non-market pricing system, or even to carbon policies which are not price driven, which is a big point. So the CBAM should also be able to recognize that a country, for example, adopts a very effective command and control carbon policy, and be able to recognize this and accept this in a fast, good corridor in order to treat it well. So yes, carbon pricing is a huge effort. CBAM is a huge effort. I'm not negative on it. I think that everything will depend on how it is managed on a political point of view, diplomatic point of view.
Thank you. Yes, and actually, I was wondering. I don't know if Barbara Mariani still has time. I know that she needs to leave soon, but I was wondering if if you, Barbara, have the time to.
I can only really spare 5 minutes, no longer, because I should be going really.
Okay. Would you like to react on
just on the CBAM? I mean, ideally, the CBAM would solve many of our problems because it would be good from a competitiveness point of view in order to avoid carbon leakage, especially with the spike of prices that is foreseen. It would be good as a driver for climate ambition outside Europe. So it would be the perfect kind of combination of many benefits. But unfortunately, politically, is going to be quite a challenge. And we have seen a leaked proposal by the Commission, and it's not going in the direction we thought. And clearly, if things happen, I mean, if this proposal remains as it is, the CBAM is not what we wanted, and it's not what we need, because it would still be going hand with free allowances to industry, to those sectors which would be in the scope of the CBAM. There are still some questions around how these certificates will be used, what kind of provisions there will be to with regard to economic areas which still have which also have carbon pricing. There is a WTO issue, so it's going to be quite difficult. And it is also quite difficult because if you look at the latest World Bank dashboard on carbon pricing, you will see that with the current 64 initiatives on carbon prices, we only cover slightly more than 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So, you know, there is a gap, huge gap, and you have to make all these instruments fit in a way that the environmental objectives is achieved. Otherwise, they are not fit for purpose, clearly. So, yeah, we are still at an early stage in this discussion. We're really looking forward to see the Commission's proposal. But everyone sees in this, I mean, there are different points of view, different perspectives to this CBAM. For us, the main driver should be the environmental objective, and therefore address imported emissions in Europe more than anything else. So yeah, I think I gave you a few insights, inputs, but I'm aware that this conversation could especially on CBAM, could go on for much longer. Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me, and hope to get back and kind of connect with you somehow in the future again.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's been a pleasure having you. Yes, and thanks for the contribution. So I was actually wondering in relation to this, because now we're also talking about international cooperations, of course, and how whether it's the CBAM is suitable in the way that it's structured, and whether it will find some issues also in international settings, or issues or drivers. And I was wondering if Stefano Verde, you could address what you think are going to be the drivers and barriers in the implementation of the CBAM, or also of the carbon pricing.
Sorry, the drivers and barriers in?
And the global implementation of the CBAM. Well, in the global implementation of the carbon pricing, because there are some discussions on.
Okay. Well, the barriers, carbon pricing, well, in the two forms, so we have carbon taxation and emissions trading. Well, following up on the comment that was made by Michele before on that report. I haven't read that report by the OECD, but I think that yes, for like a carbon price in a developing country, let's say it's not problematic for distributional, not necessarily problematic for distributional reasons, if the revenues are redistributed to offset those, the undesirable effects, distributional effects. But it can be problematic for, for competitiveness reasons if other countries, benefit from the fact, from the existing gaps in carbon prices between Europe and or other jurisdictions with significant carbon prices and themselves that may not have climate policies in place. So if this gap is narrowed, I mean, that would be economically for their exports is not good. On the other hand, if they have NDCs that they need to reach, certainly carbon pricing is a cost-effective way to achieving those. So they are also subject to these, different objectives and constraints. And I think carbon pricing will, precisely because of the Paris Agreement, and everyone has some commitment to meet, to honor, carbon pricing will spread. I think that in the form of emissions trading is the European experiment of the ETS is very important. I mean, the importance of the ETS goes beyond reducing emissions at least cost in Europe, because it's a potential blueprint for other countries. So carbon pricing, I think we will see more of it in the future in more countries. But then the barriers to it, I think, I said it. I think it's for some countries may not be convenient for international trade reasons.
Yeah, and this connects also like to the discussion on the WTO that was mentioned also earlier. And actually, I was wondering for Susanna Karp, what factor will influence the WTO discussion, especially in this case for the CBAM, but also generally once other countries also start implementing a carbon pricing.
Okay, thanks for the question. It's very hard to know which of the elements will influence the WTO discussion, but for sure, I would imagine there would be a question on whether this is protectionism or not. And in that sense, I think we have seen in the European Parliament own initiative report that proposes the introduction of a CBAM, a couple of suggestions for how that could be avoided. We don't yet know what the European Commission will propose. We've seen some leaked drafts, but those are just leaks for now. Let's say it like that. For sure, in the European Parliament report, though, there was a very clear statement that it cannot in any way, the CBAM cannot actually overlap with environmentally harmful subsidies allocated at national level. And I think one could actually draw a direct reference to maybe free allocation, actually. And so my impression is that we are actually talking about starting to decrease the amount of free allocation that European industries are getting, probably in a trial phase until 2030, to see how the CBAM would work alongside some free allocation being kept, but not covering exactly the same emissions. So I think that's how the discussion will evolve. One thing I found quite interesting, and I think it relates to what a previous speaker has said, I think she might have left the meeting in the meantime, but nonetheless, the idea that the CBAM could actually apply to, let's say, to cover Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. We did see that in the European Parliament report, which referred to quantifying the emissions from the the extraction, the manufacturing, the transport and the use of materials. And I think that's a fundamental shift in accounting that actually would work in favor of a better climate dialogue around climate change and actually more carbon justice and climate justice. So I think those are extremely useful elements to build on in the longer term. And in any case, the Commission draft confirms that indeed we're talking about Scope 1 and 2. So in any case, we're seeing a shift in the accounting. And for sure, the EU ETS with its current free allocation regime won't actually go on as it is until 2050. So changes will occur until 2050, not least because they're needed, but also because we can't reflect the same thinking we had in 2005 much later on when we're actually developing a more complex thinking around the issues. So I do think the CBAM is a really useful tool to actually promote what I called in a previous discussion a collaborative competition. So actually with the way we use the revenues, with the way that we're introducing the standard on how to measure for the emissions, the European Union is actually setting the foundation for what can be a collaborative competition.
Thank you so much. Well, speaking of competition, of course, we can imagine that some international relationships and trade relationships might change because of this implementation. And I wonder what Michele Governatori thinks about what type of shifts we might see in as a result of the implementation of the CBAM.
Well, yeah, again, it depends a lot on how good it's done and how proficient is the, I would say, the diplomatic challenge that is being initiated. But if I can answer your question from a slightly different point of view, I'm very grateful that Susanna mentioned the environmentally harmful subsidies. And if I'm not mistaken, the proposal by Stop Global Warming includes a reduction and phase out of such subsidies. I am still kind of confident that within Europe the effort of rebuilding the economy after the virus will come with a drastic reduction of such subsidies. And I hope that extending carbon pricing, no matter it is based on trading or administered, might have this very positive side effect. Just let me remind that in Italy we do have a huge amount of tax expenditure. And within this tax expenditure, which is huge, is between 50 and 10 billion euros a year in a country which has a total state budget of more or less 800, 900 billions. So it's a huge portion. And within this, according to the Minister of Environment, there are almost 20 billion a year of harmful subsidies. So I think that the first thing we have to do to fix international trade, even within the EU, is phasing out such subsidies. I hope I have kind of answered at least partly your question, Franco.
Yes, you have. Thank you. I think we're reaching the end of this of our panel, I believe, and I was wondering if you like to have some of our contributors, actually some of the panelists have had to leave, but I was wondering whether you have some final remarks that you would like to make on this issue, starting from Stefano Verde.
Yes, well, a remark I would like to share is that I think that the EU ETS now has gone, much has been learned over the past 15 years, and I think its design currently is, from a technical point of view, as is good. Important things have been learned, and I think that what I see as like the threats are more external to the ETS itself, to the instrument, and so I'm concerned about that we'll be able to keep high prices as we wish to have for environmental reasons to keep the instrument. I think we will keep it in the end, but there are strong pressures from business, and also I think I wonder whether society is ready to see the consequences of rapidly rising carbon prices. And so I really think that one reason why also I very happily accepted this meeting is to participate in this meeting is because I think we have to be, we have to disseminate about this instrument and the type of changes that we're going to see in the next few years. I mean, I think that if you see the roadmaps of the 2030 plan of the Commission, these are like a science, a fiction science book. I mean, there are massive changes that we're going to have that people will see hopefully in their daily lives. But I wonder whether we are really, most people are really ready. I fear, backlashes like those we've seen in France, which are mainly explained by a lack of, not full involvement of society, and maybe on the part of policymakers, and under appreciation of how this aspect of social acceptability of policies is important, matter.
Thank you. Indeed, the social dimension is absolutely important when designing this type of policies, of course. Susanna Karp?
Yes, well, I think COP26 is a massive milestone for the EU, but also for the rest of the world. The carbon pricing discussion needs to be navigated very carefully, because we've seen that effectively Article 6, which is connected to this discussion, but that created the stumbling block in Madrid that countries couldn't get past. So I think we need to do, all of us here on the line and those watching us, but I think we have to do our very best to be constructive and help the discussions and the engagement that will go on leading up to COP26, during COP26. Carbon pricing is going to be part of our future. I think we will have to find ways to build buy-in from citizens and acceptability. I think the idea of a citizens' carbon dividend is probably far into the future, but maybe not that far into the future. So maybe it's something we could already see in the 2030s in the European Union. So that means that there will be ways to fundamentally change the economic system to take into account the price of carbon, but also its social impact. So let's stay open-minded and let's continue talking and discussing. And yes, I'm committed to COP26. That's going to be the big testing, the big exam.
Great, thank you so much. And Michele Governatori?
No, I would like just to thank you for having me and wish a very, very good luck to Stop Global Warming initiative.
Thank you so much. I'll give the word back to Andrea, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Thanks, Franco. There is not much to say. Unfortunately, time was not enough to go deep in each of the aspects influencing the ETS and the carbon pricing future in Europe and worldwide. The European Citizens Initiative Stop Global Warming will end up in the 22nd of July. The the signature collected overcame the 60,000, but of course not even near to the target of 1 million. Not only for the topic, which was not easy for citizens, but also for the fact that the instrument was not really well known, the citizens' initiatives. But apart from that, it is our intent and idea to continue organizing online debates with you as high-level experts and others that could not join today, because in this year and a half we could get in contact with a wide range of really high-level association, organizations, and researchers on this topic. It seems that we all agree on the fact that a minimum carbon price to carbon to CO2 is needed. That at the same time we have to include in the ETS more industrial sectors now out of the scope, starting from the waste incineration to the aviation and transport, as many other, not many, but other ETS at national level are trying to do. And this is, I think, well known also by the Commission, not only by us. So I think that we can say that these two targets are ambitious, but it is our responsibility to make them real in the next future. Regarding the implementation of a carbon pricing at global level, I think it is it will be a natural future and developing destiny of the ETS in Europe, because if Europe has a carbon pricing and if Europe starts with a carbon border adjustment, every other country should start having it as well. The question is how and how efficient it could be. Anyway, we will summarize the content of this meeting in a paper, something like 1 page, 2 page paper that we will send to all of you, and also publish as a result of this event. We trust we could organize another one probably at the end of the summer, or in any case after the summer holidays, with more focused
I think we lost you, Andrea.
Yeah, we lost.
Okay, I think if it's not reconnecting, yes, well, okay. Then we move forward. So yeah, there's going to be another discussion at the end of the summer, and then we'll continue these discussions as they're fundamental to move forward. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I think I spoke for 3 minutes alone, because then I realized that everyone was not moving. So I said, there is something not working. And then I saw that I had no connection. I don't know if you could listen about 2 words of the long.
We lost you for 15 seconds.
Okay, not that much, but I was just thanking you very much for being here. And hopefully we will have other occasions to have new debates on the topic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.